My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 30 years old. And last week my father called me while he was crying, not emotional. Not upset. Crying. It was the first time in my entire life I had ever heard that sound from him. 2 years ago. I was the one crying. I had just received a stage 3 cancer diagnosis, and when I called my parents, my father said something that still echoes in my mind. 6 months of chemotherapy. 36 hospital visits. And not a single time did my family come to see me. They were too busy planning my younger brother's wedding. Now my father needs me. And when he asked for help, my answer was only 4 words. But before I tell you what I said, if this story speaks to you in any way, take a second to like and subscribe. Only if you truly connect with it. And leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read everyone. Now let me take you back, 2 years ago, to the exact day my life changed. I was working as a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized creative agency in Boston. You know, the type: exposed brick walls, way too many plants, and espresso machine that probably cost more than my first car. I loved my job. And I was good at it. I had started there as an intern and worked my way up in 5 years, no shortcuts. No favors. I lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Somerville. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. There was a single plant on the windowsill that I'd somehow kept alive for 3 years, which honestly felt like an achievement. My life had a rhythm. Coffee at 6:30 a.m., gym 3 times a week. Dinner every Thursday. With my best friend, Maya. That Wednesday started like any other. I was deep into a branding project for a fintech startup with a deadline tight enough to make my eye twitch. Slack notifications were popping up nonstop when my phone vibrated with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. I was in that rare creative flow. But something told me to answer. Miss Brooks, this is Dr. Keller's office. We have your biopsy results. I still remember how my coffee tasted lukewarm because I'd forgotten about it for almost an hour. I remember the way sunlight reflected off the glass walls of the conference room. And I remember thinking, biopsy results. Shouldn't sound like this. The results are in, the nurse continued. Dr. Keller would like to see you tomorrow morning. Can you come in at 8 a.m.? I didn't touch my coffee for the rest of the day. I didn't taste my food that night, because you don't get called in early for good news. The next morning, the doctor didn't waste time. Stage 3 breast cancer, she said gently, professionally. The tumor is aggressive. We need to begin treatment immediately. I sat there in that sterile office-framed certificates on the wall, a fake peace lily in the corner, and felt like I was floating above my own body, a woman in her 20s, still wearing her work blazer, hearing words that didn't belong to her life. Miss Brooks? I blinked. Yes, I'm here. Do you have someone who can drive you home? I thought about calling Maya, but it wasn't even 9 a.m., and she was working a hospital shift. My coworkers weren't close friends, and without thinking I said, I'll call my dad. Here's what you need to understand about my family. My father, Thomas Brooks, was a man whose opinions shaped everyone else's lives. Not loudly, not cruelly, just permanently. We didn't argue with him growing up. We didn't question him. We adjusted. And despite years of feeling like I came second, I still reached for him in that moment. Because that's what daughters do, right? When everything falls apart, you call your father. I walked out into the hallway, sat on a bench, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to dial. He picked up on the second ring. Elena, what's wrong? I'm busy. Before I go on, you need to understand the family dynamic. My younger brother, Evan, was always the center of attention. 2 years younger, but somehow always first. And that difference would matter more than I ever imagined. In my family, Evan was the son. And I was just background noise. Evan got a full ride to a private college, not because he earned a scholarship, but because my father wrote a check without hesitation. When it came to me, I was told girls don't need expensive degrees. So I signed for student loans, $87,000, for a state school. When Evan landed his first job, my dad threw him a celebration dinner. When I was promoted to senior designer, my mom sent me a thumbs up emoji. That was it. Evan had recently gotten engaged to Lily, a perfectly nice woman with flawless hair and a perfectly forgettable HR job. Their wedding was scheduled for October. 4 months away, and it had swallowed my entire family whole. Every phone call turned into wedding talk. Every family dinner became a planning meeting. My mother had a Pinterest board with hundreds of pins, venues, flowers, fonts for the invitations. I barely existed. Dad, I said into the phone, my voice cracking. I just left the doctor. I have cancer, stage 3. Silence. I waited. I could hear his breathing. Somewhere behind him, my mother asked who was on the phone. Dad, did you hear me? More silence. Then finally he spoke. We'll need to talk about this later. But he didn't say later. Around that time, I started saving screenshots of our messages and calls. I told myself it was because chemo brain was real, and I was scared of forgetting things. But deep down, I think I already knew I'd need proof one day. Dad, I said again, slower this time. I have cancer. The doctor says it's stage 3. I need to start chemotherapy immediately. I'm really scared. I was crying openly now. Tears slid down my face in that hospital hallway. A nurse walked past and gave me a look full of pity. I turned toward the wall, pressed the phone tighter to my ear, waiting for the words I needed. Come home. We'll handle this together. You're not alone. Instead, there was silence. 5 seconds. 10. Then, Elena, listen. Your mother and we can't deal with this right now. I stopped breathing. Your brother's wedding is coming up. 4 months. There's so much to handle. We just can't take this on. I felt something inside me crack. You've always been strong, he continued. You're independent. You'll figure it out. His voice hardened, the way it always did when he wanted the conversation to end. I have to go. Evan and Lily are coming over to finalize the venue deposit. The call ended. I sat on that bench for 45 minutes. Doctors walked past. Nurses, patients, families. Holding hands. No one stopped. I was just another person having the kind of day that splits your life into before and after. I wanted to call back. I wanted to scream, your daughter might be dying. I wanted to say, a wedding is one day. Cancer is every single day after this. But I didn't. I just took a screenshot. 8:47 a.m. call duration. 2 minutes. 31 seconds. And saved it in a folder. Labeled family. That was the last time I spoke to my father for 2 years. On the first day of chemotherapy, I drove myself to the hospital. The infusion center was on the 4th floor. Reclining chairs arranged in a soft semicircle, each with an 4-pole and a small TV mounted beside it. It looked like a spa designed by someone who had only read about relaxation in medical textbooks. I checked in, signed the forms. They assigned me chair 7. The nurse Rita was kind, with reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain. She accessed my port and started the drip. First time? She asked. I nodded. It's okay to be nervous, she said gently. Most people bring someone with them. I looked around. Chair 3 had a woman whose husband held her hand the entire time, whispering things that made her smile even as poison flowed into her veins. Chair 5 had a teenage boy whose mother read Harry Potter out loud. Chair 9 had an elderly man whose daughter had brought homemade soup in a thermos. Chair 7 had me. Just me. I pulled out my phone and texted my mother. Starting chemo today. The message sat there. Starting chemo today. I'm scared. My mother replied 6 hours later. By then, I was already home, curled up on the cold tile of my bathroom floor, shaking with nausea I hadn't been warned about. Hang in there, sweetie, her message read. I'm at the florist with Lily picking out centerpieces. Peonies or roses? What do you think? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I took another screenshot and added it to the same folder. I typed back. Roses are nice. I didn't tell her I'd spent the last hour dry heaving. I didn't tell her I'd had to pull over twice on the drive home because my vision kept blurring. I didn't tell her anything real. What was the point? I met Harper Sullivan during my 3rd chemotherapy session. She was a nurse practitioner who Ran a cancer support group, one of those hospital programs funded by grants about holistic care and patient wellness. I'd seen the flyers taped to the walls for weeks and ignored every single one, until Harper walked up to me. "You're always alone," she said, pulling the empty chair beside mine closer and sitting down. She had curly red hair tied back in, a practical ponytail, and the kind of steady eye contact that made it hard to dodge the truth. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She smiled, not pitying, just warm. "I didn't ask if you were fine," she replied. "I asked why you're always alone. Big difference." I should have brushed her off, said something polite, something dismissive, but I was 3 rounds into chemo. My hair was thinning, and I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in weeks. My family's busy. I said and then because something about Harper made honesty feel less dangerous, I added, "with my brother's wedding." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or anger on my behalf. "When's the wedding?" she asked. "October." She nodded once. "And when's your final chemo session scheduled?" "November." She nodded again, slower this time. That silence said everything neither of us needed to explain. "You know," Avery said quietly one afternoon, "we keep visitor logs at this hospital. Every patient, every visit. Who came? What day? What time?" She explained it was mostly for security reasons, but some patients later request copies. For their records. Or their memories. I didn't understand why she was telling me that. Not then. But I remembered it. 3 days later, I requested my first copy. Ryan's wedding was scheduled for October 15th. I was between chemo cycles then, the short window where the nausea eased just enough for me to feel almost human again. Even though the exhaustion never fully left. I hadn't planned to attend. I wasn't asked to be part of the wedding party. Not a bridesmaid, not even a reader. Not even to light a candle. Still, I thought maybe I'd go, sit quietly in the back. Just see my family. Then my father called, one of his rare calls. "Lena," he said, "about the wedding. Your mother and I have been talking." Hope sparked in my chest. Stupid, stubborn hope. "We think it's best if you don't attend." The hope died instantly. "You understand," he continued, his tone calm, like he was explaining something obvious. "You don't look well. You've lost weight. Your hair," he cleared his throat. "It's Ryan's special day. We don't want anything to distract from it." Anything, meaning me. Meaning the reminder that his daughter was fighting for her life, while everyone else worried about centerpieces and seating charts. "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood exactly what kind of family I belonged to. The wedding happened without me. I saw the photos on Facebook while recovering from my 4th round of chemo. My mother's post had 247 likes. My father smiling proudly in his tailored suit. My mother in champagne silk, dabbing at her eyes. Ryan and Chloe glowing, surrounded by 150 guests who had no idea the groom even had a sister. The caption read, "The happiest day of our family's life." I took a screenshot, added it to the folder, then I closed Facebook and didn't open it again for 6 months. Some things don't need to be seen twice. 3 weeks later, the medical bills started arriving. Insurance covered a lot, thank God for my employer's plan, but a lot isn't the same as everything. After deductibles, copays, and medications deemed non-essential, the total came to $47,000. Money I didn't have. I sold my car, canceled every subscription, stopped buying anything that wasn't on sale. And when that still wasn't enough, I did the one thing I swore I'd never do again. I asked my father for help. "Dad, I'm struggling," I texted. "The medical bills are more than I can handle. Could I borrow some money? I'll pay it back." I stared at that message for 20 minutes before sending it. My thumb hovered over the screen like it might explode. But desperation makes you forget pride. His reply came 2 hours later. "Your mother and I just finished paying for Ryan's wedding. We don't have extra funds right now. Have you looked into a personal loan? Your credit should be good." I read it 3 times. Waiting for a follow-up. Sorry. "And I wish we could help. And we love you." Nothing came. $47,000. That was the price of staying alive. And my family who had Just spent over $80,000 on a wedding, couldn't spare a single dollar. I screenshot the message, added it to the folder. Then I applied for a personal loan with a 14% interest rate, because what other choice did I have? I'd be paying it off for years, but at least I'd be alive to do it. At least, I hoped I would. The worst night came after round 4. My oncologist warned me the effects build up. Each round harder than the last, but nothing prepares you for. Lying on your bathroom floor at 2 a.m., shaking so hard your teeth chatter, while your body tries to reject itself. That was the night I lost my hair. Not slowly. All at once. I woke up to my pillow covered in blonde strands, the hair I'd had my entire life. The hair my mother used to braid when I was little. I crawled to the toilet and vomited until there was nothing left. Then I kept vomiting anyway. At 2:47 a.m. I called my mother. 8 rings. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. At 3:15 a.m. I texted Avery, I think I need help. She showed up 40 minutes later. Still in scrubs from her shift, she didn't ask questions. She just sat with me on the bathroom floor, held back what was left of my hair, and stayed until the sun came up. My mother called back at 10:23 a.m. Sweetie, you called last night. My phone was on silent. Chloe and I were at the spa post-wedding stress relief. You know how it is? A pause. What did you need? I looked at Avery making tea in my tiny kitchen. Then at the bald patches in the mirror. Nothing, Mom. I sighed. It was nothing. Oh, good. Well, call anytime. Love you. She hung up before I could reply. I screenshot the call log. And finally, I understood what family really meant. I know some of you watching have lived through something similar, being abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you. If that's you, type "me too" in the comments. You're not alone. And if you're wondering what happened when my father finally needed me, keep watching, because what comes next I promise you won't expect. But first, let me tell you how I survived. Years later, I was cancer-free, the day Dr. Ellis said, "There's no evidence of disease." I walked out to the parking garage and cried for an hour, not sad tears, not even happy ones, just release. 2 years of holding my breath, and finally, I could exhale. Everything had changed. I'd been promoted to art director. Turns out facing mortality gives you a kind of clarity corporate life respects. My boss, Victor Halle, kept my position open during treatment. Let me work remotely when I could. Never made me feel like a burden. "You're talented," he said when I thanked him. Talent is worth waiting for. I moved too, sold my Somerville apartment and bought a small condo overlooking the Charles River. Nothing fancy, just light space and a window for my ONSTRA. It survived everything, just like I did. I bought myself a cashmere scarf to celebrate. 1 year in remission. It was the most expensive thing I owned that wasn't a medical bill. Avery and I were still closer than ever. We had dinner every Thursday, just like before, but now she felt less like a friend and more like a sister. The sister I'd always wanted. My family, I hadn't seen them in 2 years. We exchanged the bare minimum. A New Year's text. A birthday emoji. Nothing real. Nothing that mattered. I told myself I'd made peace with it. Or maybe it was just a fragile truce, because I had a life now. A good one. A life I'd built myself, piece by piece, from the ground up. And then my father called. It was a Thursday evening. I was cooking dinner salmon with roasted vegetables. Chemo had taught me how to cook when controlling ingredients became a form of self-defense. The pan sizzled as my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years. Stared at it. The phone kept buzzing. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. The way I'd learned to let so many things go. But curiosity, or maybe the stubborn part of me that still wanted to believe, made me answer, "Hello, Lena." His voice was different, thin, unsteady. My father had never sounded unsteady in his life. "I need to see you." Not "how are you?" Not "it's been too long." Not "I'm sorry." Just "I need." "What's going on, Dad?" A long pause. In the background, I heard my mother's muffled voice asking something I couldn't make out. "I've been diagnosed with something," he said finally. Another pause. "Parkinson's disease. Early stage, they say. But his voice trailed off. I stood in my kitchen. Phone pressed to my ear. The salmon was starting to burn. I didn't move. I need my family around me right now, he said. There's dinner on Sunday. Your mother, Ryan, Chloe. I want you there. We need to discuss the future. The future. As if I hadn't spent 2 years building one without him. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll be there. After I hung up, something hit me. In that entire conversation, the first real one we'd had in 2 years, he never once asked if I was okay. He didn't even know if I'd survived. The next 2 days passed in a blur of dread and a darker kind of clarity. Parkinson's disease. I researched it because that's who I am now. Early stage Parkinson's isn't a death sentence. It's a slow erosion, tremors, stiffness, loss of control. Eventually, difficulty walking, talking, swallowing. It requires long-term care, patience, sacrifice. And suddenly, I understood why my father had called. Not because he missed me. Not because he regretted anything, because he needed something. And, I was the obvious choice. The daughter without a husband. Without children. The daughter who had always been expected to bend. I called Avery that night. You're really going? She asked carefully. I need to hear them ask, I said. I need them to look me in the eye when they do. She paused. I'm not letting them manipulate me, I added. Not again. I reached out and touched the cashmere scarf hanging by my door, a reminder of everything I'd survived. But I need to face them, I said. Does that make sense? Avery was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That folder you've been keeping the screenshots, the visitor logs? Yeah, bring it. Not to use, she said gently. Just to remind yourself of the truth if they try to rewrite it. I hadn't opened that folder in months, but that night I sat on my bed and scrolled through 2 years of evidence. Texts. Call logs. Hospital visitor records with my name at the top and empty columns where visitors should have been. My family's love story. Told entirely through documentation. Sunday came too fast. I dressed carefully. Not to impress but to armor myself. Black slacks, a cream silk blouse. The cashmere scarf draped loosely over my shoulders. I looked healthy, successful, like someone who had built a life without them. As I reached for my keys. My phone buzzed. Avery. You don't owe them anything, the text read. No matter what they ask. I took a breath and walked out the door. Remember, Avery had said, you don't owe them anything. Not a single thing. The drive to Newton took 40 minutes. My parents' house looked exactly the same. White colonial with black shutters, 3 stories, 5 bedrooms. A lawn so perfectly trimmed it looked artificial. The house I grew up in, but never really belonged to. The place where I learned that love came with conditions. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, watching warm light spill from the dining room windows. Shadows moved inside. My mother, probably setting the table with the good china, the Waterford crystal, the sterling flatware, all the props of a family that looked flawless from the outside. My phone buzzed. Avery again. You've got this. You survived cancer. You can survive dinner. She was right. I had stared down death. What was a family meal compared to that? I grabbed my purse, my phone inside it. The folder still there, and walked up the brick pathway to the front door. The doorbell chimed the same. 3 notes it always had. My mother answered. Her face arranged into something I couldn't immediately name. Relief, guilt, practiced warmth. Lena. She hugged me before I could react. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, the same perfume she wore to my high school graduation, to Ryan's wedding, to every milestone that didn't include me. You look wonderful, she said quickly. Come in, come in. The dining room hadn't changed in 2 years, or maybe 20, the massive mahogany table that seated 12, even when there were only 5 of us. The crystal chandelier my grandmother supposedly brought from Ireland. The family photos lining the walls. And for the first time I noticed something. The timeline stopped at 18. Ryan's college graduation. Ryan's engagement party. Ryan's wedding. Me. Frozen at 18, awkward in a prom dress, smiling for a camera that never cared where my life went next. Lena. Ryan stood, the golden boy as always, arms open. Behind him, Chloe stayed seated. One hand rested on her belly, 5 months pregnant. If rumors were true, the next generation of favoritism already on the way. Ryan, I said, accepting his hug stiffly. He felt softer than I remembered. The body of a man who had never had to fight. You look great, he said. Really? His eyes flicked briefly to my hair grown back now, shorter than before. To his credit. He didn't comment. And then I saw my father. Mark sat at the head of the table, the place he'd always claimed, but something was different. He looked smaller, older. His left hand trembled against the white tablecloth. A tremor he tried and failed to hide when his eyes met mine. I saw something new. Fear. Sit down, Lena, he said. The authority was still there, but frayed at the edges. We have a lot to discuss. I took the seat across from Ryan, back straight, purse placed carefully at my feet. Inside it, my phone waited. The trap was set. I just didn't know yet who it was meant for. Dinner was served. Rack of lamb. Roasted potatoes. Green beans, almond, the same meal my mother made for every important family event. We ate in near silence. The scrape of silverware against china filled the space where conversation should have been. When the plates were cleared, my father stood, or tried to. His legs resisted, and he gripped the table for balance before steadying himself. I'll be direct, he said. The voice of a man who had spent 62 years never being challenged. You all know about my diagnosis. Parkinson's, early stage, but it will progress. He let the words hang. My mother stared at her hands. Ryan shifted in his chair. Chloe rubbed her stomach slowly. The doctors say I'll need long-term assistance. My father continued. A pause. We've discussed this as a family. I thought. When was this discussed with me? And we believe the best solution is for someone to move back home and help with my care. The air in the room tightened. And suddenly everything made sense. Oof, that hit hard. I'm right here with you. Let's keep going. Same voice, same. Slow burn truth. No softening the edges. I unlocked the screen and opened the folder. It wasn't labeled dramatically. No receipts, no proof. Just dates. I didn't show them the screenshots. Not yet. I wanted them to understand without the visuals first. I wanted them to feel the absence the way I had. You all planned a wedding, I said. You picked flowers. You argued about seating charts. You took engagement photos and maternity photos and family photos. I looked at each of them in turn. And not once did any of you sit in a plastic chair next to a chemo recliner and ask me if I was scared. My father swallowed hard. That's not fair, my mother whispered. I almost laughed. Fair? I repeated. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been a single phone call that wasn't about centerpieces or guest lists. Fair would have been asking me how many times I threw up that week. Fair would have been remembering my last scan date. I tapped my phone lightly against the table. You want me to come home now. You want me to contribute. But you didn't want me when I was inconvenient. When I was expensive. When I was fragile. Derek finally looked up. Cam. Nobody knew it was that bad. I turned to him slowly. That's because nobody asked. Silence again. It kept happening, these long, stunned pauses where they realized the version of me they'd built in their heads didn't match the one sitting in front of them. Megan spoke then, softly, carefully. They didn't do this because they hate you. I met her eyes. I know. That seemed to surprise her. They did it because they didn't need me, I continued. And now they do. My father straightened, trying to reclaim authority like a coat he'd dropped. This family sticks together. No, I said. This family uses whoever is most available. His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. I smiled, not the polite, obedient smile from before. A small, tired one. I survived cancer, I said. I don't need to be dramatic. I stood, slinging my purse over my shoulder. You already decided my life didn't matter when it interfered with yours. I went on. So you don't get to decide it matters now. My mother reached for me. Camille, I stepped back. Love you, I said. And I meant it in the way you love something that has hurt you too many times to hold anymore. But I'm not your solution. I'm not your backup plan. And I'm not the daughter who exists to clean up after everyone else's choices. My father's voice cracked. If you walk out that door, I already did, I said quietly. 2 years ago. You just didn't notice. I left before anyone could stop me. In the parking lot, my hands finally started to shake. The delayed reaction. Harper had warned me about that. How your body waits until you're safe before it lets go. I sat in my car and breathed until the world steadied. Then my phone buzzed. Harper, how did it go? I stared at the screen for a second. Then I typed back. I chose myself. And for the first time since that bathroom floor, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like survival. That's not fair, my mother whispered. We were dealing with the wedding. And the wedding? I nodded slowly. Ryan's wedding. A celebration important enough to plan for months, important enough to spend $80,000 on. And my cancer? Not important enough to visit. Not once. Not a single time. Ryan shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. Lena. We didn't know it was that serious, he said. I looked directly at my father. And you said, I continued, voice steady, and I quote, we can't deal with this right now. Your brother is planning his wedding. I didn't, Mark began. Yes, you did, I interrupted. I unlocked my phone, opened the folder and placed it in the center of the mahogany table, face up. Would you like to see the messages? Where you told me you couldn't loan me money for my treatment because you just paid for the wedding? I asked. Or the call log showing Mom didn't answer when I called at 2 a.m. because I was too sick to stand. Or maybe my hospital visitor records. I scrolled to the document. Lines and lines of dates and times, each with the same word repeated over and over. None. 36 hospital visits, I said slowly. 36 chemotherapy sessions. 0 visitors. The room went completely silent. Chloe's hand fell from her belly. She stared from the phone to Ryan, then to my parents. Something had shifted in her expression. My mother reached for the phone, then drew her hand back. I didn't. She started, but the words trailed off. There was nothing left to say. I slid the phone toward the center of the table. The screen glowed under the chandelier's soft light. Lines of dates, times, and my name at the top like a patient ID. And that column, the one that mattered most, visitors. None. You can look, I said evenly. All of you. I'm not hiding anything. My mother was the first to reach for it. Her hands trembled as she scrolled. Months of entries, each date stamped in institutional font, each line repeating the same word. None. I don't understand, she whispered. Why didn't you tell us how serious it was? I did, I said. I opened the screenshots on my phone. Here. This is where I sent you my chemo schedule. Here's where you replied asking about roses versus peonies. Here's where I asked Dad for money, and he told me to take out a loan. And here 23 calls over 6 months, and you answered only twice. Ryan grabbed the phone from my mother, scrolling through every piece of evidence. His face turned gray. I had never seen him like this. Chloe leaned over his shoulder, jaw tight, reading every word. This can't be right, Ryan muttered. It's right, I said. I took a slow breath. Every screenshot, time-stamped, documented, proof of everything I had lived through. Everything they chose to ignore. And for the first time, I saw it in their faces, the realization that I hadn't been exaggerating, that my life had truly been invisible to them when it mattered most. Every visitor log is official hospital documentation, I said evenly. This isn't my opinion, Derek. This is what happened. This is what all of you did. I looked at my father. He hadn't moved. His trembling hand was pressed flat against the table, as if he were trying to steady himself against something far heavier than Parkinson's. I don't need apologies, I continued quietly. I just need you to remember this moment. Remember it when you ask me what I'm going to do next. I paused. And if you're thinking I seem prepared for this, you're right. I am. Because when you're betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, you learn to protect yourself. You learn to keep records. You learn that feelings can be denied, but documents can't. The silence that followed was the loudest sound. I'd ever heard. My mother was crying openly now. Not the careful tears from before, these were raw. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks. I didn't know, she kept repeating. Camille, I didn't know. You did, Mom, I said gently. You just chose not to see. Derek was still scrolling through my phone, like he was searching for something, anything that would prove them innocent. He wouldn't find it. My father finally spoke. This is the past, he said hoarsely. What's done is done. What matters now is the present. I'm sick. I need help. We need to move forward. I almost laughed. Forward? I repeated. You want to move forward? He waved his trembling hand dismissively. Whatever happened then, we need to focus on now. I need a caregiver. You're my daughter. Megan cleared her throat. Richard, she said carefully. Did you know about any of this? The hospital. Visits? The money she asked for? My father didn't answer. Derek did. Dad, you knew, he said quietly, staring at the screen. You told her to get a loan. My father's composure cracked. The timing, he muttered. The wedding, there were considerations. Considerations, I echoed. I stood, smoothing my blouse. My mother reached for my hand. Please, Camille, don't do this. We're family. And there it was. The word they always used when they wanted something. Family, I repeated. Family means showing up. Family means answering the phone at 2 a.m. Family means helping with medical bills instead of spending $80,000 on a party. Family means visiting your daughter in the hospital. Once. Just once. Her face crumpled. I spent 6 months fighting for my life, I said. 6 months of poison in my veins. 6 months of fear. I looked at each of them, and you were busy choosing flowers. Camille, my father started. No, I cut in. You don't get to say my name like that anymore. I'm not your backup plan. I am not the daughter you ignore until you need something. I picked up my purse. You have a son, I said to my father. Ask him. I can't, Derek said quickly. I have responsibilities. So did I replied. I had a job, a life, and cancer. I walked toward the door behind. My father's voice broke. Camille. Please. I turned. He was crying. Really crying. I'm scared, he said. I need you. For one brief moment the old pull returned, but that girl was gone. Dad, I said calmly. I hear you. But there's something you need to hear too. I stepped closer. 2 years ago, I called you crying. I told you I had cancer. And you said, I met his eyes. We can't deal with this right now. I smiled. Not cruel. Not angry. Just free. So here's my answer. I can't deal with this right now. 4 words, his words. I turned and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back. Outside, the air felt lighter. For the first time in 30 years, I could breathe. I was finally free. I wasn't, and I have to live with that. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't asking for anything. I just needed them to know that I saw it now. I saw everything clearly, and I accepted it. I read my mother's words 3 times. This was new. She had never taken personal responsibility. Before, she had always existed in the passive voice. Things happened, situations unfolded, mistakes were made. But here she was saying, I should have. I wasn't. I'm sorry. I didn't respond immediately. I spent 2 days turning it over in my mind like a stone in my hand, feeling the weight of it. On the 3rd day, I typed back. I appreciate you saying that. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I hear you. Her reply came almost immediately. That's okay. Whenever you're ready, or never. Whatever you need. 4 words. Completely different from the 4 words I had been given 2 years ago. I showed the messages to Harper that Thursday over dinner. She read them carefully, then looked up at me. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe a little hopeful, but cautious, very cautious. That's healthy, she said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't owe her forgiveness, Cam, but you are allowed to accept an apology too. I know, I said, smiling. I'm learning. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, Shaky, uneven, the penmanship of a man whose hands no longer obeyed him. The envelope had my name spelled out carefully, trembling with effort. Camille Atwood. I almost didn't open it. I carried it in my purse for 3 days, taking it out, putting it back until Harper finally said, "Just read it. The anticipation is worse than whatever's inside." She was right. I opened it on a Thursday evening, alone in my apartment, with a glass of wine and my monstera plant as witnesses. "Dear Camille, I am not good at apologies, at admitting when I am wrong. Your mother says it is pride. Maybe she is. Right, but I failed you not because I didn't know better, but because I made a choice. Your brother's happiness over your survival, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to come back. I'm not asking you to. Forgive me. I know I don't deserve either. I only wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see the daughter I pushed away, and I see the woman she became without me. You are stronger than I ever was. I lost you not because of Parkinson's, but because I wasn't the father you needed. I'm sorry. These words are not enough, but they are all I have. Your father. If you still allow me that title." Richard, the handwriting wobbled across the page, each letter a small battle against the tremors that would eventually take everything from him. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my drawer. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. The next day, Harper came over. I showed her the letter, the first person I trusted enough to process it with. She read it slowly, her expression thoughtful. "How do you feel?" she asked. "I don't know," I said, curling my feet under me on the couch. "Sad. I think for him, for what he's losing, for what we could have had. But not guilty. No, not guilty." I thought about it. Really thought about it. I picked up my wine glass, turned it in my hands. I used to feel guilty for everything, for not being enough, for not trying hard enough, for failing to be the daughter he wanted. But I've learned something in the last 2 years. Some people will never love you the way you need, no matter what you do. And that is not your failure. It is theirs. You cannot pour yourself into a cup with a hole in the bottom. Harper smiled. That's pretty wise. I learned it the hard way, I said, taking a slow sip of wine. I'm not rushing. Forgiveness. Maybe I will get there someday. Maybe I won't, but I won't force it just because he's sick. Or because it would make life easier for everyone else. And if he gets worse, well, I'll deal with that when it happens. But I won't set myself on fire to keep someone else warm. Not anymore. I looked at the letter again, the ink trembling, the words that carried both regret and truth. And for the first time, I felt a quiet peace. I looked at the letter still sitting on the table. That's my boundary, and I'm allowed to have it. Yes, Harper agreed. You absolutely are. 6 months later, I was still cancer-free. Dr. Patterson had used the word thriving at my last checkup, which felt almost too optimistic for someone like me, someone who had learned to brace for impact. But maybe she was right. Maybe I was thriving. I'd been promoted again, creative director now, with an office overlooking the Boston skyline. My monstera plant had made the move with me, thriving in the better light. I'd hired 2 junior designers and discovered I actually loved mentoring people, guiding them through challenges I had faced alone. I was dating someone, James, a high school history teacher with kind eyes and a terrible sense of humor. He knew about my cancer, about my family, about all the ways I had been broken and rebuilt. He didn't try to fix me. He just showed up consistently. The way people who truly love you do. Harper and I still had dinner every Thursday. She'd started seeing someone too, a surgeon from her hospital, Elena, who laughed at all of Harper's bad jokes. We were building a life, all of us together, the family we chose. My mother texted me every few weeks. Short messages mostly, thinking of you. Hope you're well. I replied sometimes, not always. We weren't close. Maybe we never would be. But we were something. A work in progress. My father's Parkinson's had progressed. He'd finally agreed to a part-time caregiver, paid out of the retirement fund he'd been hoarding. Derek visited. Twice a week now. Duty, I assumed, not love. But maybe that's all some families ever have. I hadn't seen them since that dinner. And I wasn't sure I ever would again, and I was okay with that. If you're watching this and you've made it this far, I want to talk to you directly. Maybe you're in the position I was 2 years ago? Maybe you're lying in a hospital bed, sitting in a waiting room, or crying in a stairwell because the people who are supposed to love you have made it very clear that you are not their priority. Maybe you're wondering if it's your fault. If you were different, better, easier, less needy, they would show up for you, right? I spent 28 years believing that. And then I got cancer, and I learned the truth. Some people will not show up. No matter what you do, even if you're dying, that isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of theirs. Here's what I want you to know. You are allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to say no to people who only reach out when they need something. You are allowed to build a family out of the people who actually love you even. If they don't share your blood, forgiveness is a process, not a performance. You don't have to forgive on anyone else's timeline. And if you never forgive, that's your right too. Nobody gets to tell you how to heal. Those 4 words I said to my father, I can't deal with this right now, they weren't revenge. They were a mirror. I held up his own words and let him see what they felt like. Sometimes telling the truth is the most powerful thing you can do. And sometimes the truth sets you free. I'm sitting in a coffee shop as I finish this story. My favorite spot, the one with the good lattes and big windows overlooking the street. It's Thursday afternoon. Harper will be here in an hour for our weekly dinner. My phone is in my pocket. Inside it, there's still a folder called Family Screenshots. Visitor logs, evidence of the hardest time in my life. I don't look at it often anymore, but I keep it just in case. Outside, the city is moving, people walking, cars honking, life happening, and I'm part of it now. Not watching from a hospital bed, not hiding in a bathroom, but really living. 4. Words changed everything. Not because they were clever or cruel or satisfying, but because they were true. I'm Camille, 30 years old, cancer survivor. And I've learned something that took me way too long to understand. Family isn't blood. Family is who shows up when you need them most. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who never loved you back. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself. Really. I mean it. If this story resonated with you, here are the lessons I carry every day. You don't owe anyone your sacrifice if they weren't there when you needed them. Keeping records isn't revenge. It's protecting your truth when others try to rewrite it. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're self-respect, if you're still here. Thank you. That means more than you know. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to set a boundary with family? What happened? And if you want more, check the description. There's another story waiting for you there. Until next time, take care of yourself.